So thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Tom Rickner, and I'm a creative type director for Monotype Studio. And the Monotype Studio is a team of about 60 people located really around the globe, working together on custom type projects for clients, as well as the new releases we produce for our library and updates to classic typefaces in the Monotype library. We are composed of type designers, font engineers, linguists, open type specialists, quality assurance, project managers, and people devoted to library and curation as well. And these M's that we see here represent just some of our type releases over the last 100+ years. So there are a few things I want to talk about. This is the agenda. We're going to talk about variable fonts. That's what this is all about. And so the first question is, what are they? Simply put, a variable font is 2 or more typefaces packaged into a single OpenType font file that enable you to get a range of typographic variation. So you may know of OpenType as the font format, which brought together the best of TrueType and PostScript. And so the OpenType format's been around for, oh my gosh, close to 20 years now. And the support for variable fonts is something that was an addition to the OpenType spec that happened in version 1.8. Now, what's really unique about this is, and remarkable in my opinion, is it's the first time I've seen real industry collaboration. I mean, I started out in the early days at Apple and the TrueType team, where they had the font wars, where it was Adobe and Apple and Microsoft all fight against each other with different formats. And actually this technology comes out of that tumultuous period where Adobe had come up with multiple masters, which was a technology where you could have up to 16 different masters, which would give you a flexible design space. And I was at Apple at that time, and a guy named Mike Reed, who was the lead engineer for the TrueType team, came up with his idea of how you could expand on that technology and do more. And he came up with something we called TrueType GX. And it was an absolute commercial flop. And even multiple masters was somewhat of a flop. Adobe didn't maintain support for it for very long. But the idea of having multiple masters, multiple fonts that can interpolate between one another and create new things, that stuck around in the font development world in the tools behind the scenes. And so really type designers for the last couple decades have been used to the concept of building fonts that are interpolatable and so on. But now what we've done is we packaged this into the current OpenType spec. And the way this happened was again a remarkable collaboration of people from Google, Microsoft, Adobe, Apple, and Monotype. Were all meeting a couple times a year over the course of several years to expand on the original TrueType GX variable format, which again was a commercial failure, but the patents had expired, and brought that forward into what we have today. So I've never seen such collaboration amongst people that are normally fierce competitors, and it was really a pleasure to be a part of that. So. A variable font is essentially one font file that works like a whole typeface family. And that means that in a font like Avenir, Avenir Next Bold and Light are both accessible in one file. So the A's on the right here show Avenir Next's whole range, from the light condensed on the top left down to the bold and extended on the bottom right. So we have a bunch of terms we use in variable fonts. And the first one is masters. And the masters are, you can think of them as the source or the input data, the drawings that the designer draws themselves that need to be interpolatable and compatible with one another. And they generally define the extremes of the design space. So these 5 blue A's represent extremes of weight and width, as well as the all important center font there, which is the regular weight. And this was really the differentiator between TrueType GX and multiple masters. With multiple masters, you were always drawing an extreme or a corner of a design space. You could never start by drawing the text regular, which was usually the most important thing for a customer. And so with variable fonts, we can do that. We can draw this regular in the center, and we can draw the light condensed and the light wide and the bold condensed and bold wide, and package them all together. The next term is we call an axis. An axis is simply a range of variation. And you may have a width axis where you can change the width of something, a weight axis where you can change the weight. You can have optical size axes where you change basically the shapes and proportions and spacing based upon the point size at which you're going to render. And really the number of axes and the kinds of things you want to produce are fully up to your imagination. There are a handful of sort of predefined registered tags for certain axes like weight and width. But if you invent something new and different, there's nothing stopping you from creating a new kind of variable feature and sharing that in an accessible way with variable savvy applications. So the next term is instances. So the black A's represent the masters we talked about. In this case, the blue A's represent these things that can be achieved through interpolation. And so all these blue A's are not stored data in the font. They are generated and rendered on the fly from the master data. Another way to look at that is through a mechanism which is a common user interface. Whoops, gotta play that. Why is it not playing? Well, that should be playing an animation right now. There we go. Sorry about that. So yes, as we drag the sliders, we can see that we can control the weight and width independently. And using them together, you can get just the right style you want for a given font. With that, I want to stop sharing this briefly, and we will go to a demo. Alrighty. So this is a tool. This is a Monotype tool we call Pyfont Chef. It's a Python-based tool that we use to edit and manipulate font data. And OpenType fonts are basically a collection of tables that describe various attributes. So in this case, we have the glyph table, which stores all of the glyphs in the font. And we can scroll through here and see the complement of characters that exist in this font. You've got things like metrics, vertical metrics, horizontal metrics, kerning, OpenType features. Those are all sort of individual tables. Now in a variable font, what you're getting are a handful of additional tables, such as what's called the gvar or glyph variation table, the fvar for font variation, and a host of others that all work together to create this really complex infrastructure that lets you manipulate your fonts live in an application. So the reason I will bring up this rather than say a desktop application is because this shows some interesting things. First of all, we have a list of all the styles that are stored in this font. These are what we call named instances. So if we have let's say we just have 4 masters, the 4 corners. Let's just keep it simple, 2. You go from light to extra bold. And you can interpolate anything in between, but you may want to have named instances like a regular or a semi-bold or a semi-light. And so you can define those places on the axis, give them, choose a value, a weight value, and give that a name. And so I can select any of these styles and you will see it change. And we're also seeing these little red lines. And what these red lines represent are we call them the deltas, which show the direction of points as they move from one point in a design space to another, or from one master to another. or from one master to a combination of masters. Variable fonts don't just use interpolation, they also use something called vector addition. So you can say, if I go from a regular to a bold, I want to go in this direction, and from a regular to a condensed, I want to go in that direction. We can add those two vectors together and get the bold condensed. So in addition to be able to choose any of these individual styles, I can also just grab the sliders and create something very specific. In this particular case, I'm showing a recent release of ours called Macklin. We'll show more of that later. And this has a weight and a contrast axis rather than a weight and a width axis. So that gives you a quick idea of how that works. So now we'll go back to the presentation. All right, so why are variable fonts useful? Well, firstly, you can package up an entire family into a single file. And in the case we're showing here, this is a typeface called Kairos Sans, which Terence Weinzierl created several years ago. And to show the entire family, it currently has 52 individual discrete styles when you buy the whole family. And that can be packaged all into a single font file. This is actually one of the first variable fonts we made. It was very simple because there are no curves in it. So it was a really quick thing to script together the software to package all of this. So we're putting all these things into one file. So that's not a huge savings other than organizational issues. You only have to deliver one thing instead of a zip folder full of dozens of things. But the next thing we get is compression. So whenever you add a new master into a variable font, you will get some size savings, and the data decreases. And so I've got a couple different ways of viewing this. The first shows you if 1 equals the average size of the masters that you're inputting into a font. This shows you as the more masters you add, the fewer, the smaller the average size gets. To view this another way, here we have the orange line represents the average size of input masters. So a 2-master variable font you would think would be the same size as 2 fonts, and a 4-master variable font the same as 4 fonts. That's what that orange line would represent. The other 4 lines represent 4 sample fonts, and you'll see that number 1, you don't get much savings with just 2 fonts. You get negligible savings. But by 3 fonts, once you have 3 masters, you're getting noticeable savings. And by the time you get up to 5 masters, you are on average have almost half the space as is required to store 5 static fonts. So that size savings is significant, and smaller data translates, first of all, to a smaller memory footprint in devices. So that saves real money. If you are looking at speccing out a product and you need RAM or ROM to store all of your assets, if you can suddenly cut the size of your ROM associated with font data in half, that's a significant thing. But conversely, well, not conversely, but secondarily, it also, because things are smaller, it enables you to transfer data much faster. So that means much shorter download times for fonts that are used on the web. And that translates to at least perceived performance improvements in a branded website. A lot of people today are sticking with system fonts, or would say Google hosted open source fonts, because the concern is self-hosting their own web fonts is going to slow down their web pages. And that's true. Self-hosting generally is not as good as hosting from a dedicated resource that has servers around the world. If suddenly you can cut the size of the data in half, in order to share a branded font that is unique to your brand, that can make a real difference and improve the performance. So now, while we can see this compression means to save on costs or to save on download speeds and so on, another way to look at it, the other side of the same coin, is that it enables greater design freedom within those same memory constraints. And so we've seen tremendous interest in the auto space, where we provide not only the fonts used in many cars today, but also the rendering technology. And so it is now possible to have something like we see on the right, a range of 5 weights taking up the same space as the original 2 static weights of the regular and bold in a given font family. So that's pretty exciting when suddenly a UX designer is no longer limited to just 2 weights. And really, they're not even limited to just those 5 weights we see on the right, because with variable fonts, you get seemingly endless instances, because you get not only the masters and those named instances that we sort of pre-plot out and say, this is going to be the regular, this will be the semi-bold, but you also can drag those sliders very subtly and get this continuous gradation, and you can get just the thing you want that works for your particular situation. So you're no longer hemmed into the particular styles that we release in a family. One interesting new use case we've had is we have customers that have asked for evaluation data of the variable fonts, so they could choose 1 or 2 specific styles that precisely provide what they're looking for. They may say, your regular is just a little light and your semi-bold's a little too heavy. We want 2 things, for whatever reason, that are this direction. And now they can actually play with the sliders, and they can say, this is what we want. Can you export this as 2 specific static fonts that we will use in our brands or in this particular environment? So another interesting use case. All right, so other uses, tweaking weights. As I just said, we've got this ability to, it is playing, okay, there we go. So here's a case where you're working on the UI in your car, and you're not happy with the 2 static weights you've got. And if you've got the variable font installed, you can play around with the sliders and get just the weight you want. Next up, and this is another auto particular, another use case that the auto field is very much interested in, tweaking widths. So in the auto space, user interfaces are generally all developed, usually in English, written out in English. They lay out their screens, and they get done, and then it's time to localize it, and they want to produce a German version. Well, guess what? When you translate those strings, the German's not going to fit in the same space as the English more often than not. And so if you have already sort of hard-coded the point sizes and the space in which you can render certain text, now with a variable font, you can maintain the same weight, the same appearance, but tighten up the width to fit. And that can actually be done in some cases dynamically, which I can show you a little later on. So variable fonts are I believe, going to be one of the main ways we deliver fonts on the web in the future. We're already seeing this. Google has taken some of their most popular fonts that are used on that they host through fonts.google.com, and they have created those as variable, again, primarily for the size savings we discussed earlier. It enables them to reduce the latency and increase the download speeds, and so that's a hugely important thing. If you want to learn about how to code with variable fonts on the web, we highly recommend Jason Pimental's CodePen website. He's been very active in variable fonts and trying to evangelize their use in web typography, and it's an interesting site to check out. Another interesting thing is the ability to have responsive design on the web. And so, you know, today you can have content that adjusts when you scale and change your window. Here we have an animation that we created for our Typo Labs conference several years ago, and we're actually animating not just the we're able to not only adjust the overall size of things based on the size of your window, but we're also able to animate that live, depending upon the size of the rectangle you're in, which is pretty cool. Okay, animations. This has gotten a lot of type designers excited because once you have sliders you can control, suddenly you can make text dynamic and moving. And what's great about this is that people have done things like this in the past, but they have basically been short GIFs. And yes, in this case, I'm showing you a GIF that I've captured, but this can be done live in your web design, and it is all searchable, selectable text, even though it's moving and manipulating itself. So. All right, well, this is great, exciting stuff, but where is this actually supported? Where can I use these fonts? Well, in terms of using it in your design software, Sketch, Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, Corp Express, all support these variable fonts today. The latest versions of all major operating systems, so Mac, Windows, Chrome, Android, Linux, there's an asterisk next to that because the Linux distribution uses FreeType, and so depending on which distribution you have, you've got to make sure you've got at least version 2.8 or later of FreeType in your Linux distribution. Office application support is really today limited to what we call the named instances. So if you've got a 2-axis font with weight and width, and you've got 20 named instances, things like light condensed or semi-bold expanded, you can reach those things, but you don't have the sliders today in applications like Keynote or Pages or Google Docs or Office, Microsoft Office. I'm hoping that we'll get that someday. I think it's going to be hard to convince the developers of those tools because I think they probably see it as really a niche sort of use case and maybe more confusing to the average Office user than a designer who wants to really invest total control over their type. And currently, we've got 90% of all web browsers support variable fonts. And I'm checking this caniuse.com regularly. I gave this a similar presentation to this about a month ago, and a month ago it was at 85%. So, and as people upgrade to more recent browsers, it's just continuing to become nearly ubiquitous. So that's exciting to see. All right, now, so how do I access them? How do I use them? In Photoshop, it's pretty simple. When you select a font that is variable, you will see on with the text tool, you'll see the axes on the lower right-hand corner there that you can manipulate directly. Illustrator works a little differently. Once you select a variable typeface, a small icon appears with the, okay, let me get my mouse over here. This little icon here tells you that you've got a variable font. And if you click on that, a slider bar dialog will pop up and you can manipulate that. Again, only if it is variable. And the same thing happens in InDesign. Not sure why we don't have the same mechanism across these three applications. It'd be great to have a unified method. It took a while actually to get InDesign support. They provided support for Photoshop and Illustrator fairly early on, but it took some nudging from the design public in requesting Adobe implement this in InDesign, which I think is the first place it's really useful, frankly. Another place to use this, Drawbot is a really fun tool to play with. It's a free tool written in Python, which is the language that's actually heavily used throughout font development. Little known fact that Guido van Rossum, the inventor of Python, his brother Just van Rossum is a type designer in the Netherlands. And so he started using it along with his partner, Eric van Blokland. And as soon as he started sharing the power and the ease of Python as a scripting language, it was widely adopted. And Python is the backbone of the tools we use at Monotype, Adobe's FDK, Google's font pipeline, Microsoft and Apple all use it. And so Python is the tool for working with fonts. And so this Drawbot tool is really, it's started as a teaching tool for programming, but it enables you to manipulate colors and graphics and shapes and typefaces. And with it, you can create the animations like the ones I've shown thus far have all been done with Drawbot. We've got a website here that is a good first place if you're trying to learn a bit about variable fonts, with some resources to demo applications, demo fonts you can download for free to try them out. And another place that I highly recommend, Access Praxis, is a website developed by Lawrence Penny. And actually, Lawrence, I first worked with him. He was a contractor working with Apple when I was at Apple. And he was involved in some of the early TrueType GX fonts and TrueType in general. So when he knew this was coming back, he jumped onto this and he built this website, the initial version, in a weekend to play around with variable fonts. And it has just grown over time. It has a range of typefaces to play with that come with it, but you can also drag and drop any variable font you have onto it and start playing with it. One of the neat things he's developed is a little playground here. And we've often, if you're like me or any of the graphic designers I've met, you've often had the situation where you're trying to stretch text to fit a given space vertically and horizontally, whether it's a headline, whatever. And as you're doing that, you're just basically doing a simple scale, and you're stretching things in ways that the type isn't meant to be stretched. And so he developed this cute little sample user interface for showing, as you're dragging here, when you see green, it means you are actually using part of the data that was designed. If you see red, you are under stretching, and if you're seeing blue, you're over stretching. Let me just play that again, just see if that sinks in. So here, at this point, whenever you see green, you are using the variable font within its design space. If you go beyond that, you can do it, but just know that you are now doing a pure XY stretch, and you're now just stretching the outlines rather than actually using the data internally to the font. All right. So Monotype, we have a range of fonts that are available on fonts.com, linotype.com, and actually on myfonts.com as well. I need to update this slide. We first came out with 10 variable fonts initially released, and the majority of these are basically variable versions of typefaces that have existed for some time. Others are newer typefaces like Carnero by Steve Madison and Illicit Script by Jim Wasco and Laura Worthington. And so we have been working on developing our tools to convert existing static families into variable fonts, as well as develop new fonts from the ground up to take advantage of this technology. One of our newest releases is Macklin. This is by Malou Verlon, a designer out of France. And what's interesting about this family is that it's a serif and sans family. Both the serif and sans have a weight axis, but then the serif also has a contrast axis. And so they're really designed to pair well together, and having these sliders and this variability just gives you a lot of control over providing perfectly harmonized yet potentially quite unique to someone else's use of the same typeface, which is one of the things I love about this technology. Another new release, actually our newest variable release, is called Wake Robin. This is by Carl Crossgrove. And as he says, this typeface takes its charming swagger from the hand-painted billboard, poster, and signage lettering of mid-19th century. And this is really an ideal style to bring to variable, since when you think about how these signs were originally painted, the sign painters were manually adjusting weights and widths for the space they were given. And this is a really fun typeface. If you've heard of the company called Virgin Woodtype Manufacturing, we are very excited to say that that Carl sent a copy of the variable font to James Greischeber at Virgin Woodtype. And from that variable font, he selected an instance and got permission to actually cut this in wood type. So we now have the first wood type that was started from variable technology, at least as far as we know. If someone else has done this, I'd love to hear about it. But pretty exciting thing, and we've already got people at Monotype that have ordered their wood type versions of Wake Robin. So what's next for variable? That's a great question. There is so much that we haven't even touched on in variable. As I spoke earlier about the differences between current variable and, say, multiple masters. With multiple masters, you were limited. You could have up to 4 axes. And I don't know that anyone ever made more than 3 axes. You could have weight, width, optical size. You might try to do slant in a sans serif font, but no more than 4 axes. And you had to just draw the extremes of all those different axes. You couldn't draw the main thing in the center. But with variable fonts, you are able to you really have an unlimited number, effectively unlimited number of masters you can add, and nearly unlimited number of axes as well. The first TrueType GX font that I made for Apple, I was charged with create a font that really tests this technology and expands on what is possible with multiple masters. And so I decided I'm going to make a font with 6 axes and none of them are weight and width. So I made a wood typeface called Buffalo Gals, which had control over things like the shape of the serifs, things. I need to create a slide for this. I haven't done that yet. But things like fringe and hooves and cookies and these things I just made up just to create a range of variability. And the thing is, with the tools that people are using today, they are largely based around the multiple master interpolation mechanism. And so we can do more than we did with multiple masters today, but there's so much even greater potential once the tools adapt to what is possible with the format. And so the designers at Monotype are really excited by this technology, and we are always looking for ways to stretch it pardon the pun. But first and foremost, we're looking for ways to apply it to branding cases where people need a rich typographic palette from which to express their brand voice. And so I'm excited to work with people. If anyone has any more questions on this, we're going to do Q&A here now, but after the fact, I welcome people to reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at TrueTyper, and would love to get in conversation with people that are passionate about this technology. So with that, we invite you to reach out on some of these resources and experiment and enjoy variable fonts. And with that, I will look at the questions we've had come in here. Let's see. First question, does variable font make static font obsolete, or is that a wrong way to view the relationship? That's a great question. I could see down the road where, I guess it never makes it obsolete, because sometimes you just want a single font and you don't want to have any, you have a display font and you want a single weight and style. And really, a static font is just an OpenType font that is missing some variable data. So once there is truly widespread ubiquitous support in all applications and browsers and so on, I could absolutely see an ease of use factor where no one wants to go choose which styles they want to buy. I mean, typically, the more styles in a family you buy, the more it costs. And there's some discounts based on the size of the package and so on. So from that perspective, because you have to put all the work into creating an entire family in a variable font, you don't really want to sell them for the cost of a single font, because you're not gonna recoup your costs effectively. And so with that, people may still want to have static fonts if they just want a couple styles and they don't want to spend what it costs to get an entire variable font with all that functionality. Having said that, I can absolutely see a case where, when you buy a variable font, you're basically buying sort of an application where, you get, imagine if you will, you get this variable font, you can't use it until for anything other than exporting the styles you want. And if you've exported the 2 styles you want, install them, great. You decide, oh, I want one more style. Well, you pay a fee somehow through an application, and boom, you can now export yet another style. So I could see actually variable fonts being, if you will, the back end to an e-commerce engine for grabbing the specific styles you need if you want just a couple styles. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see. Variable fonts, can they be used in After Effects? I do not know the answer to that question, and I don't believe they are. After Effects, to my knowledge, still doesn't even support basic OpenType features. And if someone can tell me differently, I'd love to hear it, because I was just researching that the other day. So I don't have After Effects myself, but let's see, what applications for variable fonts are you most excited for? Animation, I think there's so much potential there. Movable type is we're seeing more and more of it, people animating things through traditional means, but the early days of TrueType GX fonts, there was a neat set of fonts called Zycon. It was an icon font that was animated, and so you had things like your clock, where you could animate the movement of the hands. You had a lizard that would walk. Actually, in my own font, Buffalo Gals, I had an icon with a buffalo that would walk. Not very well, but I managed to make it work. And so I can imagine so many different use cases for animation, particularly as marketers are trying to grab your eyes every day in new and different ways, and we sort of become inured to certain kinds of stimulus. So if we can now move and animate that text, and it is still searchable, selectable, copyable within a website, and it's not just an animated graphic, I can see marketers just absolutely loving that kind of technology. So I think those were the questions that came in. I'll run through the chat here, see if anything came in here. Great to see people from all over the world here. My hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. Henri, good to hear you. Any other questions? Excellent. Well, as I said, feel free to reach out to me at TrueTyper on Twitter. If you've got any further questions, I'd be happy to chat with you individually about ways in which we could help you in this, and really enjoyed having a chance to speak about this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. This is a really informative presentation.